the just under $54 million we saw in the last tab in total COVID money that the district is eligible for. Now that we've closed out the books for the FY21 school year, it's showing we've spent just under 25 million of that $54 million total. Okay. And here's just the breakdown again. The 3.25 was booked in FY20. The remainder of that, the initial 20, the remaining 21.6 million was journaled in the year we just closed out. Okay, so I'm going to keep expanding on this, but when I made the distinction between journaled, so some of these costs aren't necessarily new out-of-pocket costs, right? For example, the administrative salaries that we were able to book over to the COVID relief funding, those were already contemplated in the budget being paid for by the general fund. So that's not new cost to the district, but under the audit guidelines, we were able to book that over. So over to COVID relief. So again, journaled versus spent is a very different equation. So just under 25 million journaled. When we talk about what was actually spent, and this is a real simplified version. I did my best to show the trustees just in the big buckets where we spent a lot of the money this year. There's a lot more to it than this. There were a lot of other costs that we were tracking that just weren't large enough to include in this total. So I tried to simplify this as best as possible. But when we looked at our remote platform, we knew we had 97 certified staff plus one administrator dedicated to the remote platform. But of those 97, only 46 FTE were net new hires above and beyond what we had as employees in the district the prior year. So 46 of those remote certified staff would be considered net new cost, and about $75,000 fully loaded benefits per year, you get to a total of about $3.5 million. PP&E, cleaning and sanitation supplies, all that cost that we hadn't had in our budget previously totaled about $600,000 in total for the year. We upped our substitute rates in order to attract more subs. We had a lot of absences due to the quarantines last year. So again, our substitute and temp labor cost increased by about $500,000. Summer school just through June 30th, which was really just the first 3 weeks of summer school, totaled in net new cost about $300,000. And then just overall, again, our custodial staff, another $100,000 in their increased time and effort. So you kind of summarize all that and round to some big dollar amounts here, but overall, it shows and proves what we've been carrying and kind of predicting throughout this whole last year, that the overall COVID impact on the district would be somewhere between 4 to 5 million. It shakes out. It looks to be that it was about $5 million in spend that we had to contemplate this year in net new spend. Okay. So again, big difference. We've journaled just under 5 million or 25 million, but in true new out-of-pocket spend, it was only about $5 million, right? So how does that work when you shake it all together? So what I got here is I call this a transfer summary. And I'm just taking the math we looked at on these last two tabs. So for FY21, if we go back over to here, this 21.57 million total is what we journaled for federal COVID money this year we just closed out. So that's this number here. I've just rounded up to 21.6. So we've journaled 21.6. We actually had out of pocket net new expense of roughly $5 million. Between those two, between what we journaled and what we actually spent, you end up with a net surplus of $16.6 million. Okay, that's kind of step one. Now, how do we treat that surplus? For the time being, what we have done is we've broken it down between a transfer to the multi-district and then the retirement fund. Now, what's interesting here, and I'm going to pivot back, and I hope I'm not moving back and forth too often. But when I look at, and this is another great example, the administrative salaries, when I went and asked everyone to give their best prediction of how much time COVID was on their plates this last year, once they came back and I was able to carve out a portion of their salary, we also were able to add on top of that a benefits load, which would include retirement costs that get paid out to the TRS or PERS system for employees each pay cycle. The rules with those entries would be, well, we're able to move the general fund cost for the administrative salaries over to the multi-district. We're able to bank that money and move it to the multi-district, but there's some restrictions around those retirement amounts and the benefit load on our salaries related to retirements. Those entries resulted in savings in both the elementary and high school retirement funds. And because of the restrictive nature of those funds, we're not able to do anything with that surplus except for reappropriate it. And so we can't move it to the multi-district. It has to stay within the retirement funds and be reappropriated. And what do you mean by reappropriate? Well, that means you calculate it into your next year's tax burden, you carry it over, and you give that relief back to the taxpayers. You essentially find it creates a reduced tax burden on the taxpayers of, in this case, roughly $2.5 million between the two districts. Now, what's interesting about the retirement fund, when we get to our next part of the presentation, is the board doesn't actually approve the retirement funds mills or local tax levy amounts. That's done by the county. So this is good news.